The late afternoon sun cast long, dramatic shadows across the polished oak desk in Gregory Roberts' executive suite, a testament to his meticulously curated empire. Gregory, a man in his early 40s, with a sharp jawline and eyes that usually held the calculating glint of a seasoned investor, found himself increasingly distracted. His gaze kept drifting towards the wide windows that overlooked the bustling metropolis of New York City, a city he had conquered, yet one that sometimes felt profoundly distant. His distraction wasn't a fluctuating stock market or an impending merger. It was a woman named Brenda, one of the newer members of his extensive facility management team. Brenda wasn't an executive. She was a fire safety officer responsible for ensuring the sprawling Sterling Towers, a beacon of modern architecture, met every stringent safety code. She was a professional, efficient, and almost unnervingly reserved. Gregory was accustomed to people seeking his attention, flattering him, or subtly angling for favors. Brenda, however, was an anomaly. She moved through the building with a quiet competence, her uniform always impeccable, her reports concise and thorough. What truly piqued Gregory's interest, and eventually his persistent curiosity, was her steadfast refusal of any personal gratuity. He'd tried on several occasions to offer her a bonus for exceptional work, a generous Christmas gift, or even just a substantial tip for staying late during an unexpected fire drill. Each time, she'd politely but firmly decline, her clear blue eyes holding a quiet dignity that baffled him. "My salary is sufficient, Mr. Roberts." "Thank you," she'd say, her voice soft but unwavering, and then she'd pivot, disappearing back into the labyrinthine corridors of the building. Her consistent rejections felt less like defiance and more like a carefully constructed boundary, a wall he couldn't quite decipher. This wasn't about the money for Gregory. It was about understanding what kind of person, in a city where every dollar was fought for, would so consistently refuse extra income, especially when it was genuinely offered as appreciation. One blustery Tuesday in early spring, a particularly aggressive storm front had swept through the city, turning the late afternoon sky a bruised purple and unleashing a torrent of rain. Gregory had been working late, finalizing a critical deal, when he saw Brenda preparing to leave. She was meticulously packing her bag, her movements precise. He watched her from his office, a strange sense of unease settling over him. He knew her shift had ended hours ago, yet she'd stayed, quietly ensuring all emergency exits were double-checked after a brief power flicker. As she headed towards the employee exit, he decided, on a powerful, uncharacteristic impulse, to follow her. He dismissed his driver, grabbed his umbrella, and took a service elevator. Emerging onto the street just as Brenda stepped out, pulling the collar of her modest jacket tighter against the driving rain. She didn't head towards the subway, nor did she hail one of the ubiquitous yellow cabs. Instead, she began to walk. Gregory, shielded by his expensive umbrella and comfortably ensconced in his discreet, dark sedan, instructed his driver to maintain a respectful distance. The initial route was familiar, weaving through the illuminated canyons of Midtown past designer boutiques and bustling restaurants. But then, Brenda veered off the well-trodden paths, moving towards areas that Gregory rarely frequented. Parts of the city that hummed with a different kind of energy, a stark contrast to the polished gleam of his world. The sidewalks grew less manicured, the streetlights more sparse, and the opulent storefronts were replaced by bodegas and laundromats. Gregory's initial curiosity was now tinged with a growing concern, a knot tightening in his stomach as the landscape around them transformed. The journey continued for what felt like an eternity, but was likely closer to 45 minutes. They passed under elevated train tracks, where the rumble of passing cars echoed like thunder, and then through a residential neighborhood in the outer boroughs, a place characterized by worn brick buildings and small, struggling businesses. The rain, relentless and cold, plastered Brenda's hair to her face, yet she walked with an unwavering stride, her head held high. Gregory observed her, a complex mix of emotions churning within him. This was not the path of someone with a comfortable life. This was the determined march of someone driven by necessity, by a hidden purpose he couldn't yet fathom. Finally, she stopped in front of a modest, 3-story apartment building, its facade showing the wear and tear of decades. It wasn't dilapidated, but it was certainly far removed from the luxurious Horisis Gregory inhabited. He watched as she fumbled with keys, her movements a little slower, a little more weary now that her destination was in sight. He saw her glance up at the rain-swept sky, a fleeting expression of relief mixed with profound exhaustion crossing her features. As she disappeared inside, Gregory felt an inexplicable pull to know more. He couldn't just leave it there. He dismissed his driver, telling him to return in an hour, and then pulling his own coat tighter. He stepped out into the still falling rain, walking towards the entrance of the building. He entered the dimly lit hallway, the air thick with the scent of old cooking and damp concrete. A handwritten sign indicated apartments on the second and third floors. He moved quietly, straining to hear any sounds from Brenda's apartment. He heard a soft murmur of voices, a child's laugh, and the distinct, comforting aroma of a simple meal. Peering through a slight gap in what he assumed was her apartment door, he saw a scene that would forever alter his perception of the world and his place within it. The apartment was small, likely a studio or a cramped one-bedroom. The main space served as a living area, dining room, and bedroom all at once. There was no luxurious furniture, no expensive art. A worn, faded rug covered part of the linoleum floor. In the center, on a small, scarred wooden table, sat 2 simple plates. Brenda was there, her tired face illuminated by the soft glow of a single bare bulb, and beside her, a young girl, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, with bright, curious eyes that mirrored Brenda's. The girl, Chloe, was animated, recounting her day at school, her words tumbling out in a rush. Brenda listened, her gaze loving, occasionally interrupting with a gentle question or a comforting touch to Chloe's hand. What truly struck Gregory, what truly pierced his heart, was the meal. It was meager, almost heartbreakingly so. A small portion of pasta with a thin, almost translucent sauce and a few pieces of bread. There was no lavish spread, no abundance, just enough to sustain them. Yet, the scene was imbued with a quiet warmth, a powerful bond that transcended their material circumstances. He watched as Brenda carefully divided the last piece of bread, ensuring Chloe received slightly more. Her movements were economical, practiced, the gestures of someone accustomed to making every crumb count. As he stood there, an uninvited observer to this intimate, humbled moment, Gregory felt a wave of profound shame wash over him. Shame for his own boundless luxuries, for his casual disregard for wealth, for his inability to comprehend such quiet struggle. A single tear, cold and sharp, traced a path down his cheek, mingling with the raindrops still clinging to his face. The pristine image of Gregory Roberts, the impervious millionaire, shattered in that moment, replaced by a man grappling with a stark, undeniable truth about the world he had so confidently navigated. He retreated silently, a heavy weight settling in his chest. His perception of Brenda, the reserve fire safety officer, was irrevocably changed. She wasn't just an employee. She was a fighter, a protector, navigating a double life he had only just begun to glimpse. The world outside, the rain, the distant city hum, all faded into insignificance compared to the quiet strength he had just witnessed behind that simple door. The drive back to his luxurious penthouse in Gregory's black sedan felt surreal, a stark and crushing contrast to the meager apartment he'd just observed. Every opulent detail of his life, the buttery leather seats, the hum of the climate control, the glittering skyline reflecting his wealth now, felt accusatory. He arrived home not to rest, but to confront an uncomfortable awakening. For the next several days, Gregory, typically laser-focused on his financial endeavors, found his mind consumed by Brenda and Chloe. The image of Brenda dividing the bread, the profound love in her eyes, juxtaposed against the backdrop of their severe simplicity, played on an endless loop. He realized that for all his years of philanthropic donations to grand, abstract causes, he had been utterly blind to the visceral, immediate struggle occurring mere miles from his office. Driven by this intense, unexpected guilt and a newfound sense of responsibility, Gregory began to subtly alter his routine. He started arriving at Sterling Towers earlier, deliberately crossing paths with Brenda during the transition period of shifts. He noticed things he had missed before. The noticeable wear on her work boots, the careful way she handled her lunch bag always, a thermos and a piece of fruit, suggesting a planned economy of meals. He asked his head of human resources, Ms. Dorothy Martinez, to discreetly pull Brenda's file. Dorothy, a meticulous woman in her late 50s, looked puzzled by the sudden interest, but complied. The file confirmed his fears. Brenda, 32 years old, was a single parent. Dorothy mentioned, lowering her voice conspiratorially, that Brenda had initially been offered a more demanding safety management role, but had insisted on the standard early shift fire safety officer position, declining any overtime. She said she had unavoidable commitments during the afternoons, Dorothy noted, reinforcing Brenda's strange resistance to financial advancement. Gregory now understood those unavoidable commitments were her second shift, her second life. He had a hunch about what that second life entailed, a hunch he felt compelled to confirm. He started following her again, this time with a more cautious, almost journalistic precision, using an unmarked car and keeping multiple blocks of distance. When Brenda finished her shift at Sterling Towers, she didn't head home. Instead, she took the subway deep into Brooklyn, emerging near a sprawling, older hospital campus. Gregory watched as she changed out of her uniform in a small public restroom, replacing it with plain scrubs, then heading straight into the hospital's back entrance. Confirming his suspicion, she was working a second, often less visible, job in the healthcare system, likely as a nursing assistant or a facilities cleaner, a job with demanding physical labor and modest wages. Her day was a brutal cycle. 4 hours of high-stress safety work at Sterling Towers, 2 hours of commuting, and then a grueling 6-hour shift at the hospital, often dealing with the most physically draining tasks. She wouldn't get home until almost 10 p.m., leaving her barely enough time to spend with Chloe before waking up at 4:30 a.m. to start over. This relentless schedule explained the deep fatigue he sometimes glimpsed beneath her professional exterior, the slight tremor in her hands he'd noticed during a recent inspection. The turning point in their strained dynamic occurred 2 weeks later. Gregory, still reeling from his discoveries, decided to approach her again, not with a tip, but with a promotion. He called her into his office, presenting the offer for a new higher-level compliance director role with a 70% pay increase and flexible hours. Brenda's reaction was immediate and defensive. She looked him straight in the eye, her posture rigid, her voice laced with suspicion. "Mr. Roberts, is there a problem with my performance?" Gregory stammered, caught off guard by her powerful, protective response. "No, Brenda, your performance is flawless." "Then why the sudden, dramatic salary hike?" "It's not standard protocol," she challenged, her eyes narrowing. "I prefer to maintain professional distance." Any offer that seemed too generous. Her words were a painful echo of a past trauma he could only guess at, but they hit him with the force of a revelation. She saw him, the rich, powerful man, not as a potential benefactor, but as a risk, a source of potential exploitation. Feeling utterly defeated and misunderstood, Gregory retreated, but his obsession only deepened. He began to research, using his vast resources to delve into the systemic inequalities that made Brenda's life a zero-sum game. He learned about the wage stagnation for essential workers, the exorbitant cost of childcare in New York, and the insidious nature of medical debt. His privilege bubble burst, exposing the harsh realities of the working poor. The more he learned, the less he saw Brenda as a solitary case, and the more he saw her as a symptom of a deeply flawed system. His inability to help her directly, his failure to breach her dignified defenses, became a constant, nagging frustration. One evening, Gregory saw Brenda walking home after her hospital shift. She was hunched over, moving slower than usual. He waited until she was nearly at her building, then pulled over, stepping out of his car and walking quickly towards her. "Brenda?" he called, his voice low but urgent. She spun around, startled, and then her face hardened. "Mr. Roberts, why are you here?" Her accusation, sharp and cold, cut him deeply. "I saw you," he confessed, letting go of all pretense. "I followed you weeks ago, and I saw your apartment. I saw Chloe, and I saw you at the hospital. I know you work 2 jobs. Brenda's face flushed with a mixture of rage and profound humiliation. "You invaded my privacy. You spied on my daughter. What do you want?" "To pity me." Tears of anger, not sadness, welled in her eyes. "My poverty is not your entertainment, Mr. Roberts." She turned to walk away, but Gregory reached out, stopping short of touching her. "Please, Brenda, it's not pity. It's shame. I'm ashamed of my own ignorance. I've the life Yves lived without seeing people like you." She paused, taking a slow, shaky breath. "Every rich man says that, Mr. Roberts." She finally looked at him, her eyes fierce. "You think you're a hero now? You just made me feel utterly exposed and completely degraded. I quit. I cannot work for a man who stalks me. I forfeit my last paycheck." Her resignation, delivered with such fierce, pained finality, was a punch to his gut. He watched her retreat into the darkness, leaving him standing alone in the rain, consumed by the realization that his clumsy, desperate attempt to save her had only caused more harm. Shattering the fragile, professional world she had built for herself, he had acted out of guilt, not respect, and the consequence was devastating. The next morning, Gregory arrived at Sterling Towers and immediately went to Dorothy Martinez. Dorothy was confused, but Gregory was resolute. He knew the money would only anger Brenda, but he couldn't just stand by while she sacrificed her health. He hoped she would, at the very least, use it for Chloe. He spent the next few weeks trying to reach Brenda, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails, but she never responded. Her wall was impenetrable. He knew he had to respect her boundary, yet the silence was deafening, making him question everything he thought he knew about wealth, dignity, and true connection. The only thing that remained clear was his absolute certainty that he could not go back to his old life. He had seen the truth, and now he had to figure out what to do with it, even if it meant doing it alone. The month that followed Brenda's abrupt resignation felt like a lifetime to Gregory. Sterling Towers felt empty, its impeccable order a constant reminder of the chaos he had inadvertently caused in Brenda's life. He continued to monitor the severance package. He had transferred the equivalent of $30,000, a substantial cushion in, to a designated trust under Chloe, this name ensuring that only certified educational or medical needs could access the funds, a desperate attempt to help her without infringing on Brenda's financial control. Still, the silence from Brenda was absolute. He knew, intuitively, that she wouldn't touch the severance money out of principle, and the thought that she might be struggling even more now, with one income source entirely gone, was torture. His fears were tragically confirmed 3 weeks after her resignation. One rainy morning, Gregory was scrolling through local community news alerts, an unusual habit born of his single-minded focus on Brenda's neighborhood, when he saw a devastating report. A massive fire had ripped through the lower-income housing block where Brenda lived. The report indicated several families had been displaced, and while no fatalities were reported, the building was a total loss due to an outdated electrical system. A horrifying certainty washed over him. He immediately called the police precinct associated with the area, using every ounce of his leverage and connections to get information. After hours of frantic inquiries, a weary officer finally confirmed that a mother and daughter, Brenda and Chloe Reynolds, were among the displaced. They had lost everything, but were physically unharmed. Gregory's heart sank. He raced to the designated emergency shelter, a gymnasium at a local community center, his expensive suit and demeanor a jarring contrast to the desperate, soot-stained faces around him. He finally found Brenda huddled on a cot, staring blankly at the wall, Chloe asleep beside her, clutching a singed, stuffed rabbit. Brenda was thinner, her face etched with exhaustion and despair. The sight of her, the highly capable professional, reduced to relying on emergency charity, broke the last fragment of Gregory's protective shell. He approached her cautiously. "Brenda," he whispered. She looked up, and the momentary flicker of recognition was quickly replaced by a cold, searing resentment. Her voice was hoarse. "Did you come here to marvel at the complete destruction of my life?" "Mr. No," Gregory insisted, kneeling down, ignoring the rough floor. "I came because I heard. Brenda, I was worried. I know you don't want my money, but please, let me help you and Chloe now. You need stability, a safe place. This is not about charity. It's about a human being needing help after a disaster." She remained defiant, her eyes wells of pain. She recounted the night of the fire, the terror, and the crushing realization that the small amount of rent money she had saved was now ash. "I have nothing, Gregory." It was Chloe's small, sleep-muffled voice that finally broke the impasse. "Mommy, I'm cold?" Gregory seized a moment, his voice softening, appealing not to her pride, but to her maternal instincts. "Brenda, look at Chloe. I'm not offering you a new life. I'm offering a temporary bridge to stability. A clean, safe apartment near a good school for Chloe. You can pay me back when you get another job. Set your own terms." His appeal was based on practicality and necessity, a recognition of her role as a primary caregiver, not a victim. Reluctantly, agonizingly, she agreed. "Fine. A small apartment for 1 month, nothing more." Gregory moved them that same day into a modest but impeccably clean apartment he owned in a mid-range complex, close to both a fire station and a respected public school. He set the interest rate at 0 and tore up the contract. The shift in Gregory's life was now seismic. He wasn't just a rich man trying to help a poor employee. He was a man fundamentally changed by his exposure to deep-seated systemic injustice. He realized his power lay not just in acquiring wealth, but in deploying it ethically. Over the next few weeks, Gregory began a massive He sold his second luxury condo in Miami, liquidated his private jet shares, and initiated the sale of a significant portion of his passive investment portfolio. His business partners, particularly his former partner, Jack Parker, were furious, believing Gregory was having a breakdown and throwing away millions. But Gregory was more focused than he had ever been. He began collaborating with legal and labor experts to design a completely new business model. His goal was to create a company that not only provided essential urban services like building maintenance and safety auditing, but was fundamentally structured around human dignity and fair labor. 6 months later, Phoenix Services Group was launched. The company offered fire safety, maintenance, and logistics support to corporations, but with a radical difference. Employees received double the prevailing city wage, full healthcare coverage from day one, comprehensive mental health support, and most crucially, an on-site fully subsidized childcare and educational center for all employees' children. The financial model was built on accepting slightly lower margins but achieving massive retention and unparalleled quality of service. His first and most crucial hire was Brenda. He sought her out after she had used the stabilization time to secure a new similar level fire safety job at a logistics firm. He found her confident, independent, and visibly healthier. Brenda, he stated, presenting his proposal in a professional, neutral setting, I'm not offering you a cleaning job or a handout. I'm offering you the role of Chief Operations Officer for Phoenix Services. You design the labor policies, the training, you experienced the system at its most brutal. Brenda looked through the comprehensive business plan he had developed, her eyes scanning the budget line for employee benefits. She saw the commitment, the sacrifice he had made, the sheer amount of capital he had poured in, sacrificing a significant chunk of his empire, proved this wasn't a whim. She finally agreed, but on one condition: I accept Gregory on the absolute premise that we are equal partners in this mission. You are the capital. I am the conscience. And you never, ever attempt to use your financial power to dictate my personal life or to make me feel less than. Gregory readily agreed, a genuine smile replacing the haunted look he'd worn for months. You are the conscience, Brenda. Phoenix Services Group quickly became a revolutionary success story. Clients were drawn not just to their quality, but to their powerful narrative of ethical business. Brenda, in her cool role, was a powerhouse, brilliant manager, a compassionate leader, and the living proof that a system focused on dignity could outperform one focused on exploitation. And the personal story to found its resolution. Gregory and Brenda, bonded by the painful crucible of their initial conflict and the shared purpose of their ethical enterprise, slowly let their professional partnership evolve into something deeper. They realized their differences in vision for large-scale change. Her grounding and daily reality were perfectly complementary. They eventually moved into a beautiful, modest brownstone together in Brooklyn, a house filled with light and laughter, especially Chloe's, who now thrived in her stable environment. Their journey became a testament to overcoming barriers, the barrier of class, the barrier of trauma, and the barrier of misplaced pity. Gregory learned that true wealth was measured not by assets, but by the positive impact on human lives. Brenda learned that not all power is corrupt, and that dignity, once fiercely can be the foundation of a new, powerful beginning. Their story was no longer about a millionaire following a firefighter. It was about two equals building a legacy of change, proving that the deepest